Now, if you're to ask me what my all-time favorite passenger locomotive is, or one of them, it would have to be this. The GMD FP9A locomotive. And I figured, hell, why not do a little quick history video about it and point out the spotting differences. The FP9A was first introduced in 1954 by the Electromotive Division of LaGrange, Illinois, as Canadian subsidiary General Motors of London, Ontario. 36 units would be built by EMD of LaGrange, Illinois, with 4 going to Chicago and Northwestern, and the remaining 32 going to NDEM of Mexico and Saudi Arabian Railways. In the case of the Canadian-built units, though, a total of 54 units were built by GMD's London, Ontario plant, with 43 units going to Canadian National, being numbered 6500 through 6542, and 11 units going to Canadian Pacific. These locomotives were mainly used on transcontinental services by both railroads, namely the Supercontinental and the Canadian, and would do so throughout most of their operating lives. One of the most notable events in the history of these locomotives was that 2 units, Canadian Pacific 1411 and Canadian National 6509, would be used on the 1967 Confederation train, being renumbered and repainted to 1867 and 1967 respectively, with the 1867 being fitted with that kukia horn that sounded like the beginning of the national anthem. By the late 70s, however, all FP9A locomotives from both railroads would be handed over to the newly formed Crown Corporation via Rail Canada. This included most of Canadian Pacific's FP7 fleet, and pretty soon, all units would be painted up into the iconic blue and yellow colors of VIA. Around 1983 as well, some units would be remanufactured by CN's Point St. Charles shops in Montreal into FP9ARMs to extend service life. By the time VIA started to receive their first F40PH locomotives, service life began to dwindle for these old era F units. By 1996, all F units still utilizing their steam generators would be retired off the roster. However, those who had HEP equipped, such as most 6300 series units, would still remain on the roster until around the early 2000s, mainly serving areas such as in Manitoba and around Montreal. The last FP9 to retire off VIA's roster would be in 2011, when number 6300, iconically enough, the only one of 6 engines to survive the 1986 Hinton train collision, would be donated to the BC chapter of the National Railroad Historical Society, and as of today resides at the Heber Valley Railroad at Salt Lake City, Utah, currently in storage and operable condition. Many of these Canadian-built FP9s can still be found out and about, mostly CN ones, such as on tourist railroads like the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad, on OCS trains such as Canadian Pacific's Royal Canadian Pacific, how ironic, and on Class 3 railroads such as the Ontario Southland. One unit in particular, number 6539, would be repainted back into its original VIA colors. How epic. And the only ex-Canadian Pacific FP9, which would survive into preservation, is number 1409, which into VIA years would become 6557. It now resides at Cranbrook, BC, awaiting restoration. As stated before, Canadian National would buy 43 of these locomotives. These units will be classed from GPA 17A through GPA 17E. And the CP units, well, again, they bought 11, but they didn't really exactly have any formal classification, but well, they're FP9, so I think that's enough to tell what it is. Starting with the GPA-17A, you could see that right off the bat, we've got some interesting details, and standard ones as well. Namely, there is the centralized fuel tank, which all Canadian FP9s had. The large winterization hatch, which units 6500 through 6509, as well as 6531 for some reason, would be given in an early 60s rebuild. Also, looking at the CN units, you could see that they do not have dynamic brakes, and they have a roof-mounted bell. And as you can see, just right in front of the fuel tank, if you could see that, there are re-railers there. The GPA-17B through D, they'll pretty much look identical to the A. Only difference is, of course, they don't have the large winterization hatch, well, unless you were 6531. And basically share a lot of the same features as the A, such as the 36-inch fans, fuel tank, etc. Though each class did have different types of cooling coils on the roof. Moving on to the GPA-17E class, right off the bat you can see that there are some differences, mainly on the roof area, as unlike the A through D class, which had 36-inch fans, the E class would have 48-inch fans instead. But otherwise, again, very much identical to the A through D class. And well, that's basically it. And now, looking at CP's FP9As, one of the most obvious differences, right from the get-go, is the double-stacked winterization hatch, which pretty much all of CP's FP9s had on delivery, compared to their FP7s, which didn't, but would later get this modification. Also, as you can see, compared to the CN units, right in front of the fuel tank is a water tank. Pretty dynamic brakes, which this unit has, and please try to ignore that roof-mounted bell, because most CP units did not have this upon delivery. That was added in later VIA years. But basically, all units did not have that upon delivery. Also, these units would have had icicle breakers right on delivery, because since these were used out west on transcontinental services like the Canadian, these were to break hanging icicles that were in tunnels and such. Looking at the front of CP versus CN, there are a bunch of differences right off the bat. Namely, those little MU doors that you can see on the CN unit were not added to CP units upon delivery. They would be added later on when some units were rebuilt to CN standards. And then looking at each unit face to face, you can see there are also differences. For instance, on the CN unit, there's a little strip on the cap side right there. When on the CP unit, you don't see it there. Not only this, but you could see the differences in CP having dynamic brakes and the CN unit not, as well as that present water tank on the CP unit, but not on the CN unit. So that just about wraps it up for this little documentary and spotter's guide for the General Motors Division FP9A locomotive. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you'd like something like this, both another locomotive or car or something, do let me know in the comments. If you liked it, thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. If you'd want, please subscribe and, get notifications, because that really does help me a lot. And until next time, bye.